I'll tell it the way it happened, not to make you feel sorry for me, but because the truth sits easier in my chest when it's been spoken out loud. My name is Alma. I'm 73. For a year and 3 months, give or take a week, I worked the late shift at the KFC off Highway 22, the one with the flickering O, so the sign read KFC Pen most nights. I wore black non-slips that pinched my bunions, a visor that squeezed a dent into my hair, and a name tag with Alma in block letters so big that even the teenagers called me by it. I came home every night smelling like grease and pepper, like biscuit shortening and a little bit of mop water, and I slid out of those shoes by the front door because my feet were puffy enough to hold thumbprints if you pressed them. I did it to help pay their bills. There meant my son and his family. It meant light bills I never used and streaming services I couldn't pronounce, dentist copays, school fees, and once a whole new set of tires because, Mom, it's not safe for the kids. That's true enough, tires and kids, but there's a difference between safety and taking for granted. I learned that difference somewhere around month 7. I didn't start at KFC because I was bored. I started because a letter from the electric company arrived with my name at the top and his address under it. They'd put me on the account as backup, in case of emergencies, the nice girl on the phone explained. Backup is a kind word for sponsor something you don't get to use. I remember sitting at my kitchen table with the letter laid flat, the corner curling with the humidity, my coffee going cold. I stared through the window at the neighbor's maple tree and listened to the tick of my old wall clock, the same clock that used to tell me when to take a roast out of the oven when my husband was still alive. A clock can be a friend, but that morning it felt like a hollow grin. I put on my cardigan, the one with the button that never matched, and walked up to the strip mall. The help wanted sign in the KFC window had been there so long it had sun-faded stripes. I pushed the door open. The manager, a woman about my daughter's age with hard candy eyes, handed me a paper application like it was a test I was expected to fail. "We need closers," she said. "Can you lift a 10-pound bag of flour and stand for 6 hours?" "I can lift a stubborn child and stand for a lifetime," I said, not to be smart, just because the words fell naturally. She laughed, or maybe coughed. "You got a food handler card? I can get one. You got a ride? I live a 10-minute walk away." "We got uniforms up to 2X, she said, glancing at me like I was a shape she was measuring with her eyes. "Schedules posted Sundays. We're short-staffed." Short-staffed was a nice way to say we were going to be tired all the time. The first night, the fryer roared like a beast someone had tamed with timers and rules. They trained me on breading. The bin they called the lug was deep, full of flour and powder so fine it floated in the air like chalk dust. There's a rhythm to breading chicken properly. Shake, fold, press, lift, then the gentle count to 7, while your wrists remember how to move with purpose. They taught me to sweep off just enough flour so the skin won't flake away in the oil, to check that the wings weren't trapped under the breasts or they'd cook to leather. Even work like that has finesse if you're paying attention. The boys, because so many were boys with energy that popped like static, worked the register and the drive-thru with their headsets cocked, cracking jokes I couldn't always hear. A girl named Tasha, who wore acrylic nails painted like tiny sunsets, taught me the biscuit cutter trick so you don't twist and pinch the dough shut. She called me Miss Alma and winked like we were in on a secret. By 10 p.m., the store got quiet in a particular way. Families had gone home. The late-night folks trickled in nurses with their scrubs wrinkled at the knees, a man in a reflective vest who always paid in cash, a quiet pair who were probably on a date and didn't want to discuss it. The floor felt tacky no matter how much we mopped. The fluorescent lights hummed, and the little red digits on the heat cabinet blinked like stubborn eyes. I learned the closing checklist, the fryer oil level, the The way you strain it slow so you don't splatter your shins. The wipe down of the stainless surfaces with a cloth that stained gray by Thursday. There was a burnt spot near the corner station shaped like an apostrophe. I noticed it the way you notice moles on your own arm. You accept what's there. My son, Eddie, used to call around midnight. Not every night. Enough to land like a drop in a bucket you're trying to carry without spilling. Hey Mom, you heading home? Hey, listen. The daycare said we've got a past due of... That's how it would start. He'd laugh. Mention the time he would swing by for dinner, sometime this week. Ask how my back felt, like the question itself was a warm hand. It was almost tender. Almost. Don't worry about it. I'd say more than I should have, and I didn't. Not right then. Worry would creep in later, sliding under my door like fog, when the house was quiet and my socks were still damp from the mop water that soaked through the soles of my shoes. The grease smell stayed in my hair no matter which shampoo I used. I could scrub my scalp until my fingers wrinkled, and still, when I leaned over to pull the quilt up in bed, there it was. Pepper, oil, a whisper of fryer, a trace of biscuit. It's strange what becomes your signature. I stopped spraying my old lilac perfume because it just made me smell like a garden that had finally given up and grown French fries instead of flowers. I kept a notebook by the phone. It had a sunflower on the cover and lines so faint you had to squint to follow them. I wrote every bill I paid for them with the date and the amount, a neat column down the right side. Water, 38.12. Phone, 129. Daycare, 163 with late fee. Car tires, 492. Streaming something with plus 12.99. Canceled by me. Resubscribed by them. Some nights I ran my finger down that column just to prove I hadn't imagined it. It's temporary, Eddie would say. Just until we catch up. People like to say temporary the way you say, hold the elevator. Right at the moment, the doors are already closing. Tasha liked to talk on the line between the dinner rush and the slow hour. She had a laugh higher than her speaking voice. My baby daddy, he doing the least, she'd say, scooping coleslaw into cups with her scooper just so. Least I can do is show up. And then she'd look at me and cock an eyebrow. Same for you, Miss Alma? I'd shrug and say, it's not my first shift. It's just the latest. She got it. She was 22 with a toddler and a heart shaped like a big city. She kept a tiny red bottle of cuticle oil in her pocket and a photo of her boy on her phone's lock screen. Sometimes she'd show me, and I'd pretend not to notice how he smiled like Eddie when Eddie was 3. The universe is generous with echoes. The store radio played oldies on a loop that threw in a new song every hour like a bone to the younger crew. I once heard a Motown ballad bleed into something with a heavy bass drop so sudden we all looked up and laughed. The laughter felt like oxygen. There's a kind of humor that grows out of shared tiredness. You good, Miss Alma? The boys would ask. And I'd say, I was, and most nights it was true. Good enough. I told myself I was helping. I told myself this is what Family Island. I told myself I'd rather smell like dinner than like medicine in hospitals. I told myself a lot of things that made it easier to lace my shoes at 4 p.m. The truth is, I also liked the way the paycheck came with my name on it, the way the little stub added numbers that stacked in the bank, the way it felt to buy new tea towels without checking the sale sign first. Dignity isn't fancy. Sometimes it looks like paying your own gas bill with money you earned, tossing chicken in a flour lug while your knees ached. Sometimes it sounds like the clack of a time clock. There are always 2 turning points. The one you notice right away, and the one that had already started months before without you knowing. The obvious one came on a Friday in August, the kind of heat that makes the asphalt soft. The air conditioning was throwing a tantrum, and the drive-through line wrapped around the building twice. I had flour on my cheek and a faint burn on my left wrist from where the fry basket bumped me. Eddie walked in. He doesn't visit me at work. I saw him in the reflection of the sneeze guard that covers the hot case and didn't turn around at first. "Ma," he said, easing up to the counter like a customer. He looked good, fresh haircut, clean white sneakers, sweat darkening the neck of his t-shirt in a way that made him look like a boy. I slid a tray down to the bagger and wiped my hands on the apron. I smiled. "What brings you by? You hungry? I can." "Do you have 20? He said, tapping at his phone with his thumb. "Jody's card's not working at the gas station. She's got the kids in the car. We're on our way to the lake and the pump." I looked at him standing there in his nice shoes. I thought of the water bill, the daycare late fees, the way my joints had been humming all week. "You know," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "I get paid on Tuesday. It's just 20, he said, his face doing that soft, pleading thing he uses when he's late. "We'll put it back tonight. Promise." Tasha's hand hovered over the biscuit tray. The boys at the drive-through window were watching in the reflection, not turning, but watching. I reached into my apron and pulled out the tips I tucked there. $6 in change from a nice woman who said, "Keep it, you're sweet as the tea." I looked at the coins in my hand. They felt hot, like they had been holding the room's temperature. "I can do 10, I said, my voice smaller than I meant. "I need bus fare." He gave a tight smile, like he felt both gratitude and insult. "Yeah, okay, thanks." He kissed my cheek and left. And in the swing of the door behind him, I heard the voice I'd been ignoring for months say, "Look, Alma, it's hard to explain, but that's the moment, the second turning point, the quiet one stepped into the light." He didn't put it back that night. The next day, he sent a text with a picture of the kids holding up fish. "Good day," he wrote. "You should have come." I sat at my table with my feet in a dishpan of cool water and read it twice with the kind of smile you put on for other people, even when you're alone. I tapped my pen against my notebook. Gas, 10. My handwriting was steady. That steadiness felt like a small rebellion. I made 2 decisions in 1 week. The first, I was going to keep working, but I was going to stop paying silently. If I paid, I'd say out loud what it cost me, even if I just said it to my coffee cup. The second, I needed to see a doctor about my swollen feet before they turned into something with a name that demands pills. I called the clinic on Maple and got an appointment with a physician assistant named Mark, who wore a watch with a cracked face and a wedding ring that had a dent like it had been run over by a story. "You're on your feet a lot," he said, pressing gently at my ankles until his fingerprints disappeared. "Compression socks, rest when you can, drink water, elevate." He looked up, and when you can't do those things, write down the days you can't. Bring it to me next time. He handed me a printout with little drawings of ankles. I folded it in half and put it in my purse with my notebook. That night, I sat on my sofa with my feet up on 2 couch cushions stacked and watched a thunderstorm move across the sky like sheet music. I thought about Elevate and how to do it without making anyone feel small. There's a town rumor that old women collect jars. Some keep buttons in them, some keep coins. I keep apologies. I used to hold on to every sorry my son tossed at me, as though each one were proof that deep down he knew better. "Sorry, Mom, for forgetting my birthday lunch. Sorry, Ma, for the tools he borrowed and never brought back. Sorry for the missed school play he swore he watched online. They tinkled in my mental cupboard like glass. That Wednesday, I opened that cupboard and started taking them down, held them up to the light. Most were empty. Around that time, the district manager came through the store. His shoes were shiny, and his smile was polished right along with them. "Costs," he said, holding a laminated sheet as if it were a classroom poster. "Targets, upsell, loss prevention. Think of yourselves as ambassadors." I thought about ambassadors in other countries and wondered if they ever came home smelling like fryer grease. He mentioned shrink 3 times, which means people take food in a way that sounds cheaper. After he left, we cleaned the dining room early because not many were coming in. They preferred the drive-thru and their own seats and their own radios. Tasha and I wiped the same table twice and then sat for a minute. "You ever save for yourself?" she asked out of nowhere. The question landed like a pebble tossed in a pond, small but powerful. "I did," I said. "Back when your mom was a baby, I tucked $5 bills inside a book on the shelf behind the blue vase." "What happened to the vase?" "Still on the shelf," I said, and we laughed, not because it was funny, but because sometimes you laugh at the shape of your own life. On payday, I took $40 and put it in an envelope with my name on it. I wrote Alma's things on the front, and under it, small, books, peppermint tea, a bus ride to anywhere that has a bench in the shade. I put the envelope in the china cabinet behind the chipped sugar bowl my sister gave me. It felt bold and a little scandalous, like a woman my age wearing red lipstick just to go to the grocery store. The unfair thing about bodies is they don't wait for your life to clear up before they start making demands. The swelling didn't get worse, not at first, but new aches sponsored by odd tasks joined the chorus. A pain in the left shoulder that showed up only when I reached into the walk-in cooler for a carton of milk. A roar in my ears when someone slammed the fryer lid. A cramp in my hand after I had tied 50 little bags with red handles for the drive-through order called Family Fill-Up, which always made me smile because the name felt honest. Families do get filled up, but not always where you expect. One Sunday after church, I carried a bag of biscuits to my neighbor, Mr. Fields. He's 79 and walks like a man who clocked 1,000,000 miles at the plant, and each one wants to be remembered. "You work too hard," he said, tapping the bag. "This is kindness, but it's heavy." He told me about how his sister used to say, "If the roof leaks, either patch it or take the bucket away." He meant, quit or make it yours. "I'm making it mine," I said. "Then do it," he said. "Don't talk it to death while your feet do the work." I stood on his porch and nodded like I was agreeing to a treaty. I began to say no in small, private ways. When Eddie called to ask if I could front the kids' camp deposit, I said, "I can do half." When Jody texted, "Can you pick up the kids after your shift Wednesday?" I answered, "I get off at midnight." She sent a thumbs up emoji, which made me more tired than the mop ever did. I made a hot bath and sat until the water cooled. I said no to the second shift on Mondays when the high schoolers wanted to go see a movie and tried to pin their hole in the schedule on me. "I'm not a patch," I told the manager. And to her credit, she nodded. "You're a person," she said. She didn't change the schedule, but she said the right words. And then came the night of the bucket. Not a metaphorical one, a literal puke bucket. A little boy upended his stomach beside the trash can. His mother went pale and apologetic. We brought paper towels and a mop, and the boy's face was hot and damp with shame. I started humming under my breath an old hymn my mother liked, not because I'm pious, but because it steadied my hands. "It's not your fault," I told the boy as I wiped the floor around his sneakers. "Bodies do what they need." He sniffled and buried his face in his mother's coat. Tasha put a caution wet floor sign down like a little flag that says, "We will walk more carefully here." After they left, I stood with the mop in my hands and felt something release. We can't always choose what spills, but we can choose what we clean up and what we carry. I took a night off. I told the manager ahead of time and circled the square on the schedule with a red pen. Alma off. That night, I made a pot of beans and cornbread and ate at my table with both hands free. No phone, no numbers, no grease. I opened the Alma's Things envelope and took out $9. I bought a second-hand copy of a novel from the shop on Pine, and a tiny jar of good face cream that smelled like orange peel. I smoothed it on my cheekbones and felt foolish and delighted. Then I wrote a letter. I didn't plan to. My hand just went and found the pen. "Dear Eddie," I wrote, "I love you. I'm tired." I told him about the $10 gas, about the daycare fee, about how much chicken weighs when you lift it 1,000 times in a week. I told him I couldn't be the kind of help that erases itself. "If I help, I will say it out loud," I wrote. "And if I say no, I'll say that out loud too. That way, there are no ghosts doing the chores." I put the letter in an envelope and walked it to the mailbox. A streetlight hummed. A moth touched the glass like it was kissing itself. The night smelled like cut grass and car heat. I dropped the letter in and stood for an extra second, like a woman saying amen. His reply was a text with too many words and not enough shape. "Mom, I hear you," it began, which is how people start when they aren't listening yet. "We're in a tight spot," he wrote. "This is just not the time." It's never the time when the thing you're asking for is attention. I typed back, "I love you," and put my phone on the counter face down like a loaf of bread that needs to rest. Work went on. The new kid forgot to lock the back door. A mouse found the dry storage, and the manager yelled like a person who forgets that mice don't speak English. I found a gold ring near the soda fountain, lodged where dust meets sugar crystals. I turned it in. Tasha leaned her head on my shoulder for exactly 4 seconds after a customer told her to smile more, which is the emotional equivalent of adding a chore to someone's day. The fryer oil had to be changed twice because it got dark too fast. Someone had dropped a whole bag of breading into it during the rush. I burned my wrist again and it made a little moon. I put a bandage on it and kept going. That's the thing about being useful. You keep going until you meet your own end date. And often, you're the last to know when that island. The day I knew was a Tuesday. The specials board said 2 for Tuesday, and the parking lot was full. Around 9, a woman came in with 3 kids. Her hair was escaping its clip. The oldest boy kept touching the plexiglass that kept us safe from coughs and complaints. She ordered the cheapest bundle and counted singles from her wallet, with nails bitten to the quick. When I handed her the bag, our fingers brushed. There was a callus at the base of her thumb shaped like a comma. She looked up. Our eyes met. And in that quick lock, I saw that she had no backup. No one writing in notebooks. No one working late in the smell of grease for her bills. She smiled and mouthed, "Thanks," like a prayer. I smiled back. She turned away, and as she led her kids to a table, the littlest dropped a napkin. I leaned over the counter, reached as far as I could, picked it up, and set it on the table with ceremony, like the table was a stage, and we were actors who still believed in the lines. The boy grinned. Something inside me settled, and something else stood up with stiff knees. I finished my shift, and on the walk home I decided, there was no lightning, no divine chorus. Just the sound of my shoes slapping concrete and the quiet I make when I count. The next day was my day off. I went to the bank with my notebook. The teller's name was Sherry. She wore a pin that said, "Here to help," which always makes me want to ask for more than a balance. But I didn't. I sat with a specialist in a glass office and told her what I wanted. "I'd like to stop all automatic payments that are for accounts I don't live under," I said. She nodded and clicked. "And I'd like to set up text alerts for any new automatic payments so I can say yes or no before they start." Click. "And I'd like to open a separate savings account called Alma's Envelope and put $50 a week into it." Click. She looked up, maybe expecting me to smile or explain. "I'm just trying to make my life reflect itself," I said. She smiled. "I like that." On my way out, I bought a pretzel at the stand outside, sat on a bench and ate it slowly, salt on fingers, butter on napkin. Simple, perfect, mine. The quitting didn't happen in a blaze. It happened like good bread rising quiet, inevitable, ready when it's ready. I gave 2 weeks' notice. The manager blinked twice and then hugged me in the awkward way people do when they are trying not to get flour on themselves. "You sure?" she asked. "I'm sure," I said. Tasha cried into her sleeve and then laughed at herself. "I'm gonna miss you, Miss Alma. Who's gonna tell me no with a smile?" "Tasha, you'll tell yourself no with a smile," I said. "And a few good yeses too." We took a picture in front of the mop sink because we didn't have anywhere better that was honest. My last night, I wore red lipstick. Just a little. Enough to feel like my face belonged to me and not the visor. I brought in a tin of oatmeal cookies I baked at home, the kind with raisins and orange zest, and put them in the break room with a note that said, "Thank you for letting me work beside you." The boys argued about sports, and one of them held the door for me like he was opening a great ballroom. I mopped the floor the way I always do, starting in the corner near the window where a spider had established a tiny web behind the napkin dispenser. I told her it was her last night with me, too. Somewhere around 11, a regular came in, the nurse, who always ordered the grilled chicken with green beans. "You leaving us?" she asked, seeing the small bouquet someone had brought, daisies and one audacious sunflower. "I am," I said. "You'll be missed," she said. "Probably not by the oil," I said. And we both laughed the laugh of tired women who tell the truth for dessert. I walked home slow, not from pain, but because I wanted to memorize the distance. The maple tree waved like a friend. The porch light Mr. Fields keeps on for anyone who needs a landing glowed yellow and steady. I unlocked my door, slipped off my shoes, and stood in the quiet. I could still smell the fryer on me, but under it, I caught the ghost of orange peel from my face cream. It felt like a blessing. I'd love to tell you that Eddie understood immediately. He didn't. He called. "Mom, how'll we do it?" he asked, like the question itself was a paycheck. "You'll figure it out," I said. "Or you won't, but you don't get to do it with me disappearing." There was a long silence where I could hear dishes in the background and a cartoon playing too loud. "You're mad," he said. "I'm done," I said, and the word didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a door with a window in it, the kind that lets in light. He tried again later with a softer voice and more words. "We appreciate everything you've done. It's tricky appreciation. It can be a hug or a rug. You can show me by paying your own bills," I said. "You can show me by not putting my name on things without asking. You can show me by inviting me to dinner and asking me to bring nothing but my appetite. You'd have thought I'd ask him for the moon by how quiet he got." "Okay," he said finally, the word thin as paper. "Okay." People always think okay means agreement. Sometimes it just means the conversation is too heavy to hold any longer. I took a week after my last shift and stayed home. I didn't answer every call. I let the answering machine, an old little block that still blinks, do the hearing for me. I watered my spider plant and moved it to the kitchen where it gets better light. I took my picture frames down and dusted behind them. My husband's face was there in one, younger than my son ever was. I said, "Can you believe I did that?" to his photo, meaning the months, the mop, the oil, the line of numbers in my notebook. He didn't say anything. Most dead men are consistent that way, but I could feel that if he were here, he'd have kissed the top of my head and said, "Of course you did. Then you stopped. Good." The second week, I did something that made my heart kick like a mule. I registered for a class at the community college. Not a degree or anything grand, just a continuing ed session on senior tech basics. I wanted to know how to stop being scared of my own phone, how to put photos in a folder where I could find them, how to make the screen bigger without calling a teenager. The teacher was a patient woman with glitter on her shoes. We sat in a room with windows that looked out on a patch of maple trees, and students walking by carrying backpacks that seemed to hang off them like hope. I took notes with a fresh pen. "This is my folder," I wrote, and circled it twice. I met another grandmother named Viola, who had wrists like willow branches, and a way of smiling that made you feel like a remembered child. We walked to the bus stop together after class. "It's good to learn something that no one can charge against your account," she said. "I put this on my own tab," I said, and we both laughed because we knew the value of a tab. I took my Alma's envelope to the bus line on Friday and rode to the park across town, where the old sycamores keep shade like a promise. I sat on a bench and watched a group of middle school boys play the type of basketball where the rules change every time someone misses. A grandmother across the way braided a little girl's hair with beads that clicked when she shook her head. I bought an Italian ice from a cart and ate it slow, the cold, turning my teeth into small complaints I ignored. The beads clicked. A dog barked at a pigeon that didn't care. I thought about oil and vinegar, about how some things don't mix until you shake them, and then they make a salad dressing that coats what it needs to. Then came a different kind of call. "Hi, Alma. This is Nadine from the library." I hadn't applied for a job. I had filled out a volunteer form months ago and forgotten it. "Would you like to help with our Tuesday evening read-aloud for kids?" she asked. "We need a patient voice and the kind of hands that know which way to hold a book so everyone can see." I closed my eyes and saw grease and flour, saw napkins and mop water, saw the little boy's face after we cleaned up his sick. "I can do that," I said, and I meant the specific and the large. Tasha texted me a picture the next day of her and her son at the playground, his cheeks fat with summer, and wrote, "Got a promotion, night shift lead. Your pep talks worked." I smiled so hard my face felt like it was learning how to be younger. On the first Tuesday, I wore my cardigan with the mismatched button replaced, finally, by one that matched. I read a book about a bear who ate too much honey and got his head stuck in a jar. A little girl laughed so hard she hiccuped. When it was over, a boy with a gap-toothed mouth came up with a serious expression. "Do you get paid for this?" he asked, as if he needed to understand the bargain the world had made with us. "I get paid in hiccups," I said, "and in the way you listened." He nodded like he was going to write that down and invoice someone. I made tea when I got home and sat with my notebook, adding a new column. Library, $0. Worth measurable only if you count my heartbeat. Eddie brought the kids over 2 weeks later. He texted first. "We'd like to visit. We'll bring dinner." It was the first time in a long while I hadn't been asked to bring my wallet to my own kitchen. They arrived at 6 with a bag of rotisserie chicken and salad mix, and a small tub of mashed potatoes that tasted like milk and hope. The kids ran in with that sound you only get from feet in socks on old floors. "Grandma!" they sang, which is a song that never gets old on me. Jody hugged me, which she has done before, but this time she didn't smell like rushing. Eddie kissed my cheek and didn't ask for anything except where I kept the forks. We set the table with real plates, and the kids made a mess of the salad dressing. During dinner, I told a story about my first night at KFC and the way Tasha had taught me the biscuit trick. The kids listened, eyes round, shocked that their grandmother once wore a visor and a name tag and handled something as dramatic as a pressure fryer. I told them the grease smell stayed in my hair for hours. "We like fries," my grandson said, as if offering a life raft. "I do too," I said. Jody asked if I'd teach her my oatmeal cookie recipe. "It has orange peel," I said, and she made a little delighted noise I decided to believe was sincere. When they were leaving, Eddie stood on the porch for a second longer than useful. "Mom," he said, eyes still on the sidewalk. "I'm figuring it out." "I know," I said. "Figure it out where the kids can see you. That way they'll learn it too." He nodded. He looked up. "You smell like oranges," he said. I laughed. "I do. I like it." Then he hugged me. It was a real one, not the quick tapping kind. Grease and orange peel and, son, if you bottle that, you'd have a perfume no one could sell because it belongs to the exact size of us. I'm not a saint. I didn't float away on a cloud of good decisions after that. I still had days where I looked at my notebook and felt the old itch to fix by paying. When that happened, I'd open my Alma's envelope, touch the bills inside, and say, "This is not just money, it's a boundary." I made mistakes. I overpromised to the library and had to call and say I needed a Tuesday to rest. Nadine said, "Yes, rest." Eddie missed a pickup and called half an hour late, frantic. I said, "We're okay. You are too. Next time, call sooner." He didn't argue. The next week, he called 5 minutes early just to say he might be 5 minutes late. We're all learning case by case. Sometimes I walk past KFC on my way to the grocery store. I look in through the glass at the girl behind the counter who's new, at the boy taking out the trash who doesn't yet know you can angle the bag so it won't drip down your shin. I see the apostrophe-shaped burn mark near the corner station. It's still there. Part of me misses the rhythm. Not the smell or the ache, but the way the time disappears when your hands are busy. That part doesn't make me want to go back. It makes me want to bake biscuits in my own oven with butter I bought with my envelope, and then bring a plate to Mr. Fields and to Tasha on her night off. The biscuits puff up fine without being perfect. They open in layers you can peel, soft and hot. "Look," I say to no one in particular, because I have become the person I talk to, and she answers kindly, "We made this." A month after I quit, a letter came from the electric company. It had my name at the top again. I sighed hard, sat down at the table, and opened it. But it wasn't a bill. It was a notice. Account holder requested to remove secondary. I stared at it. This was not my doing. A sticky note fluttered out, the kind you can jot a quick word on. In Eddie's handwriting, "Mom, fixed this. Should have done it last year." That's all. No confetti, no trumpet, just a thing that was wrong, made right by the person to whom it belonged. I slid the paper into the back of my notebook and went outside to tell the maple tree like we were neighbors. Winter came in hot-headed, then remembered itself and settled into cold. I bought a pair of lined slippers with money from my envelope and a winter hat with a pom-pom because I saw a toddler wearing one and wanted to know what it felt like to be that silly. It felt wonderful. On a snowy Tuesday, I read a book at the library about a small blue truck and made the sound of a cow that made every child in the room delight in laughing at me. Children are generous if you give them a good sound to hold. On a Thursday, I found the ring I'd turned in on a woman's finger at church and resisted the urge to tell her the story. Something stayed just mine. And on a Sunday, I stood at my stove and fried chicken for myself for the first time since I left KFC. I dredged it in flour I'd seasoned myself, not from a bag with a code on it. I let the oil get to the right shimmer and laid the pieces in with the care you'd give a paper boat to water. My little kitchen filled with a smell that was like a kinder cousin of the one that used to ride home with me at midnight. I made coleslaw with too much pepper the way I like it, and biscuits that leaned a little but rose just fine. I set a place for myself at the table with the good plate and the cloth napkin. I ate it slow. I licked my fingers. I tapped my notebook and wrote, "Dinner 1." I didn't write the cost. Some things you pay for with relief. If you're waiting for the grand finale where I stand up and tell off a room full of people or uncover a small scandal involving a utility company and a line with my name on it, you'll be disappointed. My life didn't explode, it exhaled. That's the truth that took me a year and 3 months, a dozen burns, and a stack of checks to understand. Exhaling can be the bravest thing. It makes room. And with room, the ordinary miracles show up. A boy asking if he can help set the table because he saw his father do it and thought it looked like a magic trick. A call from Jody saying, "Can you give me the cookie recipe? I want to make them for your birthday." My neighbor's cat finally letting me scratch behind her ear without trying to bat me away. The quiet joy of sitting in a chair that isn't earned by exhaustion, but by the fact that it's yours. Last week, I took the bus at dusk just to sit in the big square of light near the window. The town slid by, familiar and a little kinder at that hour. We passed KFC. The O in open was still temperamental, flickering. A girl with acrylic nails, maybe Tasha, maybe a new one, laughed at something invisible and true. A man in a reflective vest carried a paper bag like it weighed nothing and everything. Across the aisle, a woman held a child whose cheek was pressed to her shoulder in that fierce sleep kids do. The bus hummed. The driver whistled something off-key. I thought about sweet tea and napkins and apostrophe-shaped stains. I thought about orange peel and envelopes and the word done spoken like a key turning in a lock. I breathed in, I breathed out. I'll keep the smell of grease in my memory because it's part of the truth of me. I'll keep the ache of those swollen feet, not as a badge, but as a caution and a map. I'll keep the names of the ones who worked beside me. Tasha, with her sunset nails and true laugh. The boys with their too loud jokes and tender glances when something hurt. The manager who came around eventually to, "You're a person," and meant it. I'll keep the notebook, and I'll keep the new column where I track the things with no numbers. Hiccups, oranges, the way my son nodded on the porch. If you asked me now why I did it, why I stood in a room full of heat and breaded chicken while my feet puffed and my hair held dinner like gossip, I'd say, because love gets confusing when it dresses in other people's coats. I put on a uniform to buy my son's coat. Then, I hung up the uniform and asked him to buy his own. He's warmer now. Me too. That's not a miracle. That's a change, which in the long run is better because it can be repeated, taught, handed down. One more thing, and then I'll close this and put the kettle on. There's a tiny scar on my left wrist, shaped like a crescent moon. I see it when I pour tea, when I turn a page, when I hold out my hand to a child who wants to see the pictures better. I used to see that moon and think pain. Now I see it and think light. The same shape, different truth. That's what happened to me, to my house, to my kitchen table. Same shape, different truth. And if you ever catch a whiff of pepper and oil on an old woman wearing red lipstick, be kind. She might be carrying home both dinner and a story she finally learned how to tell without disappearing from it. So, there at Island, I worked late shifts at KFC to help pay their bills. I came home smelling like grease, my feet swollen, my name tag leaving a faint rectangle on my shirt. I was useful. Then I was honest. Now I'm Alma. That feels like enough to set the table, to pass the biscuits, to let the pot boil gently while the people I love arrive on time or a little late, holding nothing but themselves.